Stephen Ray for becoming a patron. I want to thank Heather Jones for her patronage. Um, and I want to thank the rest of you guys. If you've seen our GoFundMe, there are zero people have contributed, but they have contributed through PayPal and Zelle to save money on fees and stuff. So I just don't want you guys out there to, if you click on it, feel bad for us, because people are contributing, but they're just contributing in different ways. Um, so a couple of things have happened. Um, One of those things is that I have. And thank you to those people that have contributed in PayPal and Zelle. I am gonna put the Warani video or GoFundMe up, and I'm doing them separately because it's, the other GoFundMe is for like necessities, emergencies, and the Warani thing, although I think it's very important, is just kind of a bucket list deal. So I feel like it's better for us to just keep them separate. And hopefully we have about 30 days to raise as much money as we can to fund the Warani excursion. I am feeling a lot better today, but there's ups and downs all the time, and you never know how I'm going to feel tomorrow. Um, so we were talking about the perils of the spiritual journey and how you can find yourself in a tremendous amount of trouble because a lot of different things can happen. In my case, it's like I had really pierced the veil. I had the floodgates wide open. People were noticing, so they were putting me on a pedestal. I had started this band, and so I was getting all this attention. And I'm realizing that I have all of these capacities and gifts, and so one of the issues that I encountered was ego inflation, and also, when you discover precognition and you realize that you do seem to have a sort of uncanny ability to sort of influence your experience in ways that might be considered, beyond the normal means. It can be very overwhelming. And so everything happens for a reason. And that's really important to remember. These processes of ego inflation and confusion and delusion. I gave a little bit of that in the last live stream where I was talking about how in order for any new order to arise, there must be chaos, because you have to kind of break down the structure in order to create space so that there can be movement. And the movement, the space is what allows the movement that allows the reconfiguration. Well, okay, no, everything doesn't happen for a reason. I don't think that everything does. I think about half of things happen for a reason. There's order and chaos, and there are perfectly balanced antonymical energies in the universe. And so there is chaos and there is order. And that's why, sometimes things happen in accordance with, our will, and other times it just seems like there's chaos, because both chaos and order are real things. And constituent forces in the reality that we're contending with. And so beyond that, though, we're confronted with all of these things because they ultimately lead to a greater degree of self-comprehension, of self-awareness. It allows us to see into the places where we normally refuse to shine a light. We're left with no choice. One of the great reasons for the efficacy of psychedelic drugs for facilitating healing in areas of depression and drug addiction and PTSD, maybe in particular, is that it sort of forces a confrontation with things that we normally can glance around. And the mechanism that facilitates that is enhanced communication between, what's up, man? Another very helpful supporter, man. Thank you so much as well. And by the way, you guys, if you haven't jumped on the Patreon, this is a good time. I've finally started to get the Ritual Magic course up, and I'm pretty pleased with how it's coming out so far. And it's about extracting all of these different techniques and methods and practices from all of these different systems and cultures all around the world and combining them. And so that's what works for me. I think synergy is the best way to go about things. If you look at the most beautiful people in the world, they're all mixed race. The best music is derived from mixing genres together. If we're going to talk about religion. This is eventually the second half of this is going to be totally an anti-religion video. And I'm not putting anybody down. I'm not hating on anybody. I'm not picking on anybody. I'm not judging anyone. I'm speaking from the heart and saying that religion is bad, period. And Christianity and Islam are the worst of the worst in certain ways, historically, you know. So, I definitely want to differentiate between, committing to a religion and drawing from, there's nothing wrong with extracting the good things from even evil shit, you know what I mean? Learn from everything you can. But it's important to make that designation and not allow yourself to get stuck in any honeypots like religion. But so I think that even the practices of ritual magic, meditation, all of these things basically have the same underlying mechanisms. They are enhancing inter-region communication in the brain. If you want to think about it another way, the subconscious is speaking to the conscious mind. And so you're given a fuller map. You're exposing the places that you refuse to look to yourself. And unfortunately, for a lot of us, I think the more damage that you carry, the more difficult this process is going to be. It's going to result in some very tumultuous times, and these times have been given labels like the dark night of the soul and the crossing of the abyss. And it's an interesting thing because it's this archetypal process that is more or less the same for every single person. There are certain stages that everyone seems to go through. One of the most well-known, the two are synchronicities that I think, think about this. The two regions of the brain are communicating better, and we are starting to experience symmetry between our consciousness within us and symmetry with our experience in the external world, which is what synchronicity is. So it's an awareness of this symmetry, and the reason that's happening is because these blind spots that we had created in our minds translate to blind spots in our perception of our world and our reality. And so when you eliminate those blind spots, those disconnects between regions of the brain that aren't communicating, those blind spots in your perception of the objective world are going to dissolve. And what that leads to is a number of things. And most importantly, I think, for me at least, the whole point of all this is just to have a richer experience. My personal perspective, what I have gathered from all of these, psychedelic experiences and practice of ritual magic and all of this strange, crazy, otherworldly stuff that's happened to me. And actually, also just the worldly things that have happened, is that the universe is here because consciousness has discovered that it can create situations and experience them from different vantage points. So our only real purpose, our only agenda, is to be a sensory organ of this universal mind and to have the greatest depth of experience that is possible. And it seems to me, not only based on my own experiences and observations, but looking around the world at other people that are on similar paths, when we have this greater depth of experience, we have a more satisfying life experience. We are more content. We're less likely to go on a mass shooting or just be a dick in our day-to-day life. It brings greater peace. And so this experience of these magical phenomena like synchronicity and Eckhart Tolle is kind of one of like two gurus that I find almost no fault with. Almost always those guys are, it's gonna turn out badly, like every cult. This is one of the reasons I'm always kind of railing against Christianity. It's a cult, and there has never been a cult in the history of the world that it's ended well for. Never one. And I don't understand why people think that that one's going to be different somehow. It's not. It's never been different. It's always bad. Uh, so yeah, Eckhart Tolle seems like a cool guy. I like the other one. What's his name? Osho, I think. I mean, I don't know that much about him, man. I don't know if he's done wicked shit or whatever. I mean, just based on like the quotes and stuff that I've seen, he's like one of the most reasonable, down to earth of all the sort of guru types. But so, all I was really getting at is that the tumultuous experiences that almost inevitably follow this experience of piercing the veil, and of course it's the veil between worlds, but it's also just the veil between the two regions, the two main regions of our own brains. Um, and so, as we change how the perceptual apparatus behind our forehead relates to itself, inevitably, we shouldn't be surprised to find that there are changes in our perceptions and our experience of the world at large. And so, the best advice that I can give anyone and then we're going to move on to tearing religion to pieces and throwing Jesus under the bus. But the only real advice I can give is that you have to be as objective about yourself as you possibly can. You know, if I had it all to do over again, you know, it's how do you say this? Like, I was given every bit of information that I needed. I was given all the advice that I needed to follow from, I don't know what it is, our subconscious inner guides, however you want to think about it. But I had such severely damaged self-confidence that no matter how powerful I got, no matter how much adoration there was of people around me, no matter how well I was doing at things, I always felt like it didn't compensate, you know. And by the way, this is, you know, healing our lineage, you know, like, why are we doing all this? If you plan to become a parent, even if you have friends and close associates, you know, one of the main things that comes from all this is that the generations that follow us don't have to suffer in the ways that we did. They don't have to miss opportunities that are presented to them. So, you know, there's a lot wrapped up into the value of these processes for people, because it reduces our own suffering and expands the parameters of what is available to us to experience, and enriches our lives. But it also frees the generations that follow from our baggage, which normally they're. So what happened to me, you know, taking full responsibility for my own actions, which is important, but also, you know, you have to analyze this stuff and figure out what happens. This is how you break the spell. So in my case, my mother was so severely damaged that, you know, she could not believe that something of value had come from her. So the conscious part of her mind would recognize, like, you know, okay, the school says my son is extremely gifted. They want him in special classes. You know, all of this stuff. I was like a child prodigy guitarist and all of this. And so she had to see all of that. But at the same time, if I would talk about, like, well, okay, well, I'll become a rock star, then she would shoot it down. Or, you know, like, there was also this sort of bringing me down to her level constantly. And so she found a partner that matched her in that way. So both of my parents had this huge self-esteem problem, and they are going to pass that on to their progeny. And so I think really that is like the most valuable thing to come from these journeys of spiritual growth and development and enhanced self-awareness, is that we don't run the risk of continuing to pass these things down to future generations. Because, you know, without that programming, I can't even imagine what my life would have been like with the kind of intelligence and talent that I had, you know, or have, really. I mean, it's not too late, and I'm still committed to picking my life up right where I left off and trying to get back on track, right? Doing the same things, you know. I totally believe that living for your dreams is what we're here to do. And no matter how many times you have to start over, I don't think that there ever comes a time when you should just pack it up, pack it in, and become a normie and, you know, sell yourself short. I think that it is completely toxic, and and it's sort of like a really good representation of what's wrong with our society. That we have parents that have obviously given up on whatever dreams they had. You know, they sold out super early because of the pressures of conformity, herd conformity, and the desire to have a good career and all of this shit. But then they're telling their kids to pursue their dreams and not give up no matter what, when they've clearly fucking failed at it themselves. So, you know, even if it's gonna mean some more difficult years, you know, with my family, we're all totally on board and committed to see me, you know, get back to the United States and at least take another few years to see if I can become fruitful, you know, living as a musician and as an artist and a mystic or whatever it is through social media and making music and doing all these things, rather than, you know, trying to conform, which I think is less and less of an option anyways. You know, there aren't really any jobs out there, and less and less people are inclined to do that. So what I'm getting at too is that as you resolve these traumas and issues, and you go through these processes that are catalyzed by ritual magic and psychedelics and meditation and all of these things, you discover that your capacity to live for those dreams is enhanced and enhanced and enhanced and enhanced and enhanced. Because the only thing stopping you is you. In my case, it's 100% true. I mean, if you go back through the history and you look at where I had put together these amazing situations, it's not that I failed. I would just walk away from them at the critical moment. And that's because of programming, you know, and it's not enough to become aware that you have these predispositions. You have to really, really, really focus and commit. And, you know, the mind is a tricky thing. And what would happen to me, I think, is that I would make a bunch of progress and I would be convinced that I had gotten to the point where I wouldn't have to worry about the self-sabotage anymore, and then it would still happen, you know? And it's only really since I've come back here to Ecuador and I've freed myself from every addiction. Like, I no longer drink coffee, you know, like I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do drugs. I mean, I take psychedelics on occasion. But really, you know, it's like the first time in my life where I really have this clear confidence that I have this self-mastery, you know? And it's like it's taken so many falls and so many restarts and false starts, but it's worth it, you know, to just never give up. Just don't give up. And, you know, integrate your lessons. You have to take the time to integrate your lessons, which is another thing I had a really hard time with. But, you know, learn from my mistakes. This is why I tell you guys about them all the time, you know, so you can scan your own behavior and look for these things. But pranayama, and when it comes to re-imprinting the brain, there's nothing that is going to do it better than pranayama. And, you know, I've explained the mechanism behind that many, many times, but it's basically just you're inundating the brain with oxygen for a period, which enhances its capacity to catalyze neurogenesis and enhances neuroplasticity. And then you're exhaling it all, and we're keeping the breath distended. And so you're depriving the brain of oxygen, which accelerates these altered states that remove these filters and encourage inter-region communication of the brain. So you're basically, you know, in a sense, you're simulating the activity of a psychedelic compound. And honestly, I think that the best way to make this use of the pranayama is to take moderate doses of one of these neurogenesis and neuroplasticity enhancing compounds like LSD at a moderate dose, and then, you know, using pranayama to reprogram the brain. And so another thing that I can offer in terms of, you know, if you are in the early stages of the awakening process, you have started to see 1111 every time there's a weird coincidence, and you know, strings of 3 numbers that are, you know, 111 is always in association with thoughts of unity and love, and 444 is the number of initiation, and you know, there's just all these things that you'll notice. And it was really crazy for me because, you know, I didn't use the internet when all this stuff was happening to me very much at all. I don't know that it was like a thing out there in pop culture. But the other day, or a few months ago, I guess, I found an old video of Maynard James Keenan, the lead singer of the band Tool, talking about the early stages of awakening in like 1989, right? And he's like, well, one of the first things that will happen is that you'll start to see 1111 and 111 and all of the same stuff that I had experienced. So that really, was something that happened that really drove home to me that this isn't some weird new agey delusion. It's not. There's actually a word for seeing numbers and attributing. Of course, science calls it a condition. But it's, again, I think what it is really is that there is this symmetry in the underlying wiring under the board, and because our consciousness and the external world are fundamentally the same thing. The symmetry is the two sides of the spiral. You know what I mean? Those are the polarities. Like the realm of pure consciousness is kind of a reflection of the world of matter, and they're just, like the infinity symbol, they're kind of spiraling and interchanging, and they are reflections of each other. And so that's what synchronicity is. It's that you have a more holistic consciousness, and so you're actually able to perceive the symmetry within your being as it is existing in the manifested world, in the objective world. Really self-awareness and confidence, and also if you start to have all of these experiences and they stop, like that scared the hell out of me. Like life went back to normal almost completely a few times, and I just that is the classic peak and valley experience of the mystic. Don't worry, it's just like everything else. It ebbs and flows. There are peaks and valleys. It's like one of the things that's really driven this home in recent years is studying financial stuff and looking at charts of cryptocurrencies and stocks and stuff. I mean, you see all of these mechanisms of the universe manifest in every part of it. It's so holographic. The Fibonacci retracement pattern in stocks is the same basic mechanism as that which constrains a seashell to build a spiral or a galaxy. All of these universal laws are coming to bear on every system in the universe, and they all express it. And so again, this is one of the differences I think between real spirituality and religion. We are dealing with certainty, not faith. And so we should move on to this other topic because it's Sunday night. I want to spend some time with the family. Please, by the way, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. Especially, we only have a few days till the end of the month, and we're really trying to raise money to go to the Warani village. This is a big deal for us, and a big deal in general, I think, raising awareness in terms of conservation. I'm also trying to make myself a guinea pig so that they have a story. The Shipibo have healed all these people, and they've generated a reputation, and so now people are coming to see the Shipibo and get healed, and so they're able to conserve their lands and protect their culture. That's not happening here for the Warani, and the Warani are they have one of the best knowledges of the plants, the healing plants of the jungle, and they have some of the least influence, much less than the Shipibo, from outside culture, almost none at all. So really excited about this opportunity. Really need your support though to do it. At this point, it's not clear whether we're going to be able to afford to do it at all. So we really do need support to make these amazing things happen. Okay. So why did I bring up religion this Sunday? I'm not picking on this guy. I really feel like as far as Christians go, he's very open-minded, and there's the influence that he's going to have on other Christians is going to be to encourage them to embrace other cultures. And when I was growing up around conservative Christian, there was no tolerance of anything but Christians. But it's not good, and here's why. I have actually, you'll notice I've removed Dakota Wint from my suggested channels. I've unsubscribed. In the last couple of videos, it's like there's been more and more religious content. And here's why it bothers me, and I want to be clear, I like this kid, I see him as a positive individual. It's not about that. I think, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And every Christian in the history of Christianity has thought they were doing good by promoting Christianity, but they're not. And the reason, there are a lot of reasons, but my biggest issue, I guess, is that I see there being a revolution in consciousness. And I think that the adoption of prepackaged organized religion by people that are supposed to be escaping from the mind-forged manacles of the past is moving backwards. This is not progress. And if you are in the least bit enlightened, you are not religious. I'm sorry if that's hard for you to hear, but it's true, and here's why. The first thing that happens when you start to expand your consciousness is that you'll understand where cultural influences are coming to bear on your mind. So it doesn't take a tremendous amount of self-awareness or, expanded consciousness to realize that if you have this experience of something transcendental, something beyond the material that is undeniable, and suddenly, as Dakota was saying in his live stream, that, he was a total atheist, materialist, anti-organized religion, which I would say he had it right at that point. And then he had these experiences of transcendental, and he went, Jesus is real. That only happens because he's in a Christian culture. If it, and this, you see this all over the world. If someone in India in a Hindu place, place that is predominantly Hindu, has this transcendental experience, they, oh my gosh, Krishna is real. Or if they're, in the Middle East and it happens, oh my God, Allah is real. And I feel like if you're a person that is pursuing enlightenment, you are, one of your first tasks is to understand how psychology and consciousness and the brain works. So I just, I'm not trying to be down on anyone, but it should be super obvious that if you have a spiritual experience and the first thing you do is just assume that it means that the predominant religion of your culture is the truth, the reason behind that should be really obvious to you, and you should not fall for the trap. And the other really, really big reason I have that I criticize Christianity and all cults of any kind is that there is this implicit idea of spiritual hierarchy. And there is no spiritual hierarchy in my opinion. There are no higher spiritual beings. God, in my opinion, sort of exists, but as a field, not as a person. And my finger is not superior to my nose. They're just constituent parts of a body. And when we talk about the will of God, or we talk about, the deity, I consider myself, my will is 100% equal to the consciousness of anything else that exists in the universe. It is just one universal field of consciousness. Also, in the Western mystery tradition, we have this idea of thought forms. And so the irony is that Christians have actually created Jesus just by believing in him, if these ideas from Western mystery schools are correct. But another reason why these religions are so effective at taking power from people, which is what they were designed to do, right? Proof that that's why they were created exists at this point, and we'll get into that in a minute too. But so let's assume that there is truth to this idea that you can use your consciousness to have some kind of, even if it's very, very subtle, to exert some kind of effect on the energy that constitutes the universe and creates our experience, right? These ideas of manifestation or even synchronicity kind of implies something along those lines. Let's just assume that that's true. This is part of the foundation of magic. And I would say that since I can move my hand, no matter what anyone says, that's consciousness causing matter to move. It's a fact, right? So when you pray to something to cause something else, if that thing you're praying to isn't real, let's just say hypothetically it's not real, if you aim a laser at an object, the laser will have an effect on that object. But if you just beam that laser off into space, it's not going to do anything. And this is the same thing as praying to Jesus or Allah or whatever. You are giving your power away to some imaginal thing, and it's wasted in the void. So this is why these religions have been institutionalized. This is part of it. Because they actually take spiritual power away from people. They limit your capacity to have power and to influence your reality. So, again, like I know these people have good intentions when they talk about this stuff and promote this stuff, but it's not good. And so let's talk about cults. You guys remember that time that millions of people were burned at the stake and cultures were destroyed and, people were tortured and murdered because they didn't believe the same thing as other people and it had nothing to do with Jesus? Oh, the Muslim thing, right. See what I'm saying? Like it's always religion that causes these massive amounts of destruction. And I think that we are all culturally indoctrinated, even though those that are more open-minded among us. And so we are all taught that being tolerant of other people's beliefs and respectful of people's beliefs, even if they're completely insane, is the proper thing to do. When, in reality, our culture is basically a bunch of cynicism wrapped in politis. It's not really sincere. And so that's one reason to disregard it. But I don't think that is really a good approach. Of course, we shouldn't shun people or, discriminate or any of that kind of stuff. But I think if people have dangerous, toxic ideas, it's totally okay to tell them so. In fact, I think that we're sort of obligated to do so. That's why I do it. I know that, for example, the Dakota's following, really, really big. He starts talking about Jesus. A lot of the people that are following him, I've been watching his comments. A lot of people are calling him a guru and like worshiping him, basically, which I don't think he signed up for. I think it's terrible that people are laying that on that kid. But that's the mentality that these religions create. And again, it's that idea of spiritual hierarchy that is so dangerous and toxic. But I'm getting a bit distracted. Let's stay on the topic of cults. We have Jonestown in Guyana. We have the David Koresh thing. After they burned all those children and all that stuff, the followers of David Koresh still believe that he's Jesus, even after they revealed that he had all these teenage girlfriends and wives and even children that he was married to. They still believe he's the Savior, okay? This idea of absolute faith, no matter what, is not good, no matter how you slice it. And I think it's really odd that, if we look at a movement like the Nazis, and we recognize that they gassed all these people, they were brutal to anyone who didn't think like them, and then we look at Christianity and we say, okay, well, they burned all these people at the stake. They still cause all of this misogyny and judgment and, even violence against gay people and no, man, we cannot, there's no reason to keep it. My son, he has his morals totally intact. Nobody's taught him anything really, and he's too young for that stuff. Like I'm saying we haven't deliberately done that. But before he eats anything, he'll give his mom a bite, first, before he even eats. He's not even 2. We do not need it either. That's the thing. And I think that the tendencies, well, let me finish what I was saying. Why do we excuse these things that are definitely associated with the history of Christianity, but we don't excuse the Nazis? It's because the Nazis weren't religious? So we can condemn them for being associated with killing millions of people, and really, if you look at the history of Christianity, there has been more death and destruction, and entire cultures laid to waste. So I guess I was just compelled to mention it because I'm genuinely disappointed and disturbed that someone with such a huge following that people regard as one of the beacons of consciousness in the psychedelic movement has fallen into the trap of religion, and he's increasingly promoting it to his followers who have started to think that he's a guru, and it's a really frustrating thing to see, and I think it's genuinely tragic. I really want to see us move into the future and come from a higher place where the ghosts and demons of the past are no longer pursuing us. And in my opinion, Jesus and Christianity are like, this unwanted groupie following us around in an after party. There are no other Bronze Age myths that we still carry around with us. And there is nothing in the entire doctrine that isn't just common sense, basic morality. So, it's just a really crazy thing. It's a really crazy thing. And, I've seen this kid talk about, that he's enlightened and that he's gained enlightenment from, these compounds and stuff. And the reality is, if you are religious, you're not enlightened. It's not possible to be both, because enlightenment means that you have a valid relationship with consciousness. Like, what you are perceiving is things as they are. And the reality is, if you have a spiritual experience and you attribute it to a certain prepackaged religion that is the predominant one in your culture, that's the obvious reason that you have done that. And so the situation is to be transcended, not embraced. And so it never, ever, ever turns out well when someone with a huge following is religious. Charles Manson, David Koresh, Jesus Christ, the guy in Guyana. This is never, ever good. It's never turned out good. So I don't see why we would. It's weird to me that people make these excuses for religions, because we don't make the same excuses for the Nazis, but there is historical absolute certainty that Christianity has the same kind of atrocities associated with it as the Nazis do. And yet people will defend them. It's completely insane. Okay, so here's another element of it, right? If you come to me and you say, well, I believe Quetzalcoatl, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it right, but Quetzalcoatl, the feathered plumed serpent of the Incas. You say, I think that may have been a real spirit or a real being of some kind. And it's like, well, we have Lucifer, which is like a winged serpent, kind of. It has all those associations. And we have the same story of the same type of being with the same function in all of these different places all over the world that are totally disparate and had no communication. That is evidence that there might be some objective reality to this being. In the case of Jesus of Nazareth, we have the opposite. We have a bunch of earlier myths that we can trace all of the parts of his personality, his story, a composite myth, right? Aside from that, we have 0 eyewitness accounts. The absolutely anal records kept by the Romans have no record of any arrest of the Jesus of Nazareth. Nothing to support the story exists anywhere throughout the entire planet. Nothing. And there are much more minor historical figures that there is absolute evidence that they really actually existed. So I think that whenever you believe in falsehood, there is a certain toxicity to your belief. It is unavoidable. And I have never really met a religious person of any religious persuasion that I would consider to be really sound and sane. I think religion is a red flag, period, end of story. No, that's got nothing to do with it. That's like saying, okay, so we accept the atrocities of Christianity because they also had redeeming qualities. You can say of the Nazis as well that there are all these atrocities and they also had redeeming qualities. It's true. That does not do that. That's meaningless to me. It means nothing, especially because we do not need Christianity in order to have morals, and they did not come from Christianity. That's one of these crazy things that Christians are always trying to say, that before Christ things were so terrible on this planet. Oh, sure, yeah, people were getting tied to stakes and burned alive because they didn't believe in... No, they weren't. They weren't. It's just not real. This is just stuff that people say that's not actually based on history. It's just complete garbage that people say in defense of something that should not be defended. And I think it's important to have these conversations. I totally would invite Dakota Wint to come on and explain why it's not toxic to continue to propagate Christianity. But I think you would probably lose that argument pretty severely. Um, so we were talking about the fact that, okay, and then there's also this. There are actually documents dug up by oh man, I wish I could remember his name. You can just Google um, "We Created Jesus," and you'll find articles about this. There's some anthropologist, or I don't know, I can't remember his actual title, but they found documents in Rome where they explained why they created Jesus. There was a Palestinian Messiah, warrior Messiah that was coming. They wanted to make the people into pacifists and to detach them from their pagan rites and rituals that actually gave them power, right? Christianity is actually designed to, well, I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just responding honestly. I don't think that does anything. I mean, saying they also have redeeming qualities. Yeah, well, so did Charles Manson. I mean, that doesn't mean that it was okay that he did what he did. Okay, so one of the intentions that the Roman consulate had when they were designing the religion was to actually disassociate people from valid, real spiritual connection. And I think that that is really obvious when you look at the effect of Christianity. It doesn't seem like real spirituality to me. When I go to an ayahuasca ceremony and you hear, or I'm doing it, people are singing these otherworldly, the presence of the power of the magic is so strong that it's shocking. That you're in the presence of some transcendental force. When you go to a Christian rock concert, it's like being tortured by Satan in hell. It's like the most empty, vapid, soulless. Because I think on some part of their being, they know they're full of shit, and I think that comes through the music. Well, Jesus wasn't real. That's the thing. Jesus never existed, and we have mountains of proof of that. From the fact that there's not one single eyewitness account, nothing in a journal, nothing in the Roman consulate about the trial or the arrest. But also we have actually written documents about, the Romans saying this is why we created Jesus, in order to basically make people into manageable slaves. So like I said, I'm not trying to pick on anyone. I'm not trying to put down people's beliefs just because I'm a dick. And I think I'm pretty objective about it. If you come to me, as I said, and you say, I think Quetzalcoatl might have been based on something real, well, sure, there's evidence all over the planet from totally disparate cultures that have a similar myth about a similar looking being that does kind of the same thing. We actually have reason to consider the possibility, so I'm not going to have any issue with you. Plus, you're not going to condemn a homosexual because you believe this. You're not, you don't have a superiority complex because you think that Quetzalcoatl might have been based on something real. And also, the biggest thing is the idea of spiritual hierarchy. I think that even the belief in hierarchy in our social strata is not okay. At least in terms of it being delineated to us. I think that real leaders do not need to be elected. They don't need to be chosen. In a natural system, when things are allowed to come into homeostasis, and they will, because that's what happened when natural law exerts itself upon systems. They come into homeostasis, right? Real leaders will just float to the top. No one needs to tell you when someone really truly should be in charge. It's obvious to everyone. And so there's just so many reasons why this old paradigm, the religious structure, and again, you guys, anything that has been institutionalized, we should be weary of. Because they are systems used for control. Well, I mean, you can not think religion is evil if you want, but I am saying that the religions that we have are engineered to have effects and to create psychological precedents in people that cause evil. And the reality is that we have access to the truth about the universe, about our origins. We can have gnosis. And that is so much more valuable than getting your spiritual truths from a book or from a person. In fact, when you get your spiritual reality vicariously, it is almost worthless. It's not real. That's why when people try to commit themselves to, like, I'm not going to sin, I'm not going to do these things, and then they do them anyways. It's because they haven't developed an organic constitution within themselves that delineates to them that they should behave in a certain way. They're just trying to conform behavior to a set of standards without any real experience or knowledge that compels them to do so, right? And fear isn't going to do it, It's not going to do it. Especially, that's another thing with Christianity. There's a couple of other levels why I think it's so toxic. And one of them is the idea that someone else should suffer for you. You do whatever you want, someone else suffers for it. And if you look around the world, of the Christian world, you see people, whether it's subconsciously or not, embracing that kind of idea that other people can suffer so that they can prosper. This is basically the whole American paradigm in a nutshell. That's something that really killed me recently when I realized that it's not that Americans don't realize that teenagers are sent to die in wars purely for profit. It's just not their problem for most people. They don't see it that way. And this is something, speaking of real spiritual knowledge, right? The truth is self-substantiating. When you have arrived at a real metaphysical truth, a real spiritual truth, there will be no question about it because you can observe it manifest in the universe, right? And this is what is about to happen to the United States. They have created a situation where they were able to extract youth, or they were able to extract a standard of living that was entirely dependent upon exploitation. This is black magic in a nutshell. And the reason that black magic in the mystery schools is said to be bad, if nothing else, is that all of those forces are going to come back upon you and destroy you in the end. And I'm pretty convinced that's what's happening in the United States. And I think a lot of us, everyone intuitively understands this, but I think myself included, because I want to go back to the United States and continue to benefit from those exploitation economies. When I say it out loud, it really makes me cringe because I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? Like knowing it and then still doing it. And if you live there, it's unavoidable. You know what I mean? It's absolutely unavoidable. If you are consuming American products, if you're buying American gasoline, if you're, living with the higher standard, it is because there are child slaves in China. It is because there are child slaves in South America. It is because they're blowing people up in the Middle East. You know what I mean? That is why you have the life that you do, at the expense of babies and children. And here's the thing, America, it's gonna come back to you. And it doesn't matter whether you understood it or not. Facts don't care about your feelings. And this karma is not based upon, people think that karma is like you do good and then good things happen to you. That's not really exactly it. Karma is just cause and effect. It is natural law. It's just as reliable as anything else. That's why I was saying earlier that when you pray to an imaginary God and nothing happens, but then you use your consciousness directly focused on the thing and something does happen, that's because all of these things are relying upon cause and effect. There is no woo in the universe. There isn't. It's not that there isn't a spiritual dimension. It's just that everything functions according to, natural law. It uses energy, like whether you're talking about the realm of pure spirit or the realm of material. It's all got to have some kind of mechanism in order to act. You know what I mean? So there is no possibility that the United States is not going to have to pay for exploiting the rest of the world for centuries so that it can be fat and happy, that's not all going to come back on it. It was a real bummer to have to realize that the other night, that there's absolutely no way to avoid those consequences. And whether it happens little by little or all at once, I don't know, maybe those of us that are magicians around the world can figure out some way to mitigate the impact. And this is what alchemists are really for. This is part of the reason that magicians and alchemists were the ones that kings and queens took counsel with, because they can figure out maybe how to mitigate the effects of energy as it interacts with itself. So it's like, when people say, well, I didn't realize that, having 3 cars and a house that's way too big for my family and sitting on my ass and consuming all this crap all the time, and that I could afford it because there were children that were enslaved all around the world. I didn't understand all that. It's like putting your head into the jaws of a lion. The lion bites your head off, and then you try to say that wasn't right because you didn't understand it. It's totally irrelevant. The lion's still going to bite your head off. And I think that that's the same kind of karmic justice that the United States is probably about to experience. Yes, Clark, religion is bad, period, the end, in my opinion. I'm not flexible on that point. If you feel like you need to adopt religion, you have failed. You don't need religion. No one needs religion. There's no need for religion. You meditate, you take psychedelic experiences, you can study the universe, you can observe the universe, and that is where spirituality comes from. Adopting a religion is giving up. It's failure. Taking someone else's ideas as your own beliefs, it's always been so strange to me that people would that they do that they find these doctrines and then they adopt them for a while, and then maybe a Jew decides he's not a Jew anymore, he wants to try being Islamic. Why do you need this prepackaged shit? Just go out into the universe and see what you experience. You know what I mean? That is how you generate spirituality. That's how you develop into a spiritual being. It's not by reading stuff in a book and trying to impose ideas on yourself and behaviors that have not been catalyzed through organic process. It's bunk. It's totally bunk. And whenever you act out of accordance with, what is really good and true, it's going to have toxic consequences. So religion is absolutely bad. I'm not, you can think what you want, and I support that, but I am not ever going to agree that religion has any place in this world at all whatsoever. We should just burn it all and forget about it. And everyone needs to have their own experiences that catalyze these processes. That's what real spirituality is. It's not about adopting beliefs from somewhere. That doesn't make any sense. Well, what you're really saying, I'm not terrible, is that Christ is a label that is convenient for you to use for a cosmic force. But that's, again, it's still cultural. It doesn't mean that that's really what it's called or anything. It's just cultural stuff. I wouldn't call it that. But I know what you mean, and I don't have any fault with that. Again, if I had to distill everything that I think is important into a single sentence, or maybe, I don't know if it's maybe 2 sentences, I'll know when I say it, but it comes from Christ, or whoever wrote that book, because Jesus is like Bugs Bunny. This is a person that never existed. But the idea that we have to love our neighbor as we love ourselves is the only solution. It's the only solution. And there's really no other way to even say it. So, it's not that I feel like every single constituent element of every religion that ever existed is totally bad. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I would not ever encourage someone to become a Thelemite and follow Crowley. I think that Satanists that actually believe that they're following an evil God are fucking morons. Lucifer is not a real being. It's an archetypal type of consciousness. You know, Christ was never a real person. Like it's, but you can draw on elements of all of these systems in order to inspire and to use the tools that you find there. I think that once you completely define yourself as a Christian or a Satanist or a Jew or whatever, you're flirting with fucking disaster, and it's just not healthy. It's just not healthy. Everything that you should believe, everything you believe should be based on your own experiences. Nothing else. Not adopting anybody else's bullshit. Don't follow leaders. Ever. Shouldn't be any leaders. Always gets us into trouble. By the way, you guys, while we're on the subject of holy wars and all of this kind of stuff, the fact that we have a terrorist threat now in the midst of COVID, if you think that that is like not a contrived circumstance, you might want to have your blood checked for magnetic proteins, right? Like, I've really been trying to abandon the whole conspiratorial perception of world events for a really long time. But over the last 2 years, it has just become absolutely impossible to completely. And honestly, I think that it's because of this awakening. I think it's because people are starting to realize their divine sovereignty and, you know, transcending religion, period, totally, once and for good, forever, is one of the first and fundamental steps. And then politics is another one, you know, political categorization. That's what I was saying about, you know, enlightenment and religion, and saying that no one is enlightened if they're religious. And also, if you have a political designation, you're not enlightened. You will know better than to put these labels on yourself and try to conform to any kind of prepackaged doctrine if you're really in a state of consciousness expansion and spiritual growth. There is no Republican and Democrat amongst the enlightened. There is no Christian or Jew. There is none of that. There's none of that. When the Buddha was asked if there was a God, he just said, that's not really our concern, and there's really no way to know. That is the answer that an enlightened person gives. No other answer. No other answer. That's, you know, there are certain characteristics that you can look for to ascertain whether someone is actually enlightened or not. There's that guru, what's his name, the one that killed his wife, and so many people love this guy. But 100% certainty, he killed his wife so he could be with an underage person in his, whatever you call it, that, you know, the things in India where the gurus hang out. But, you know, just to drive the point home, if you're enlightened, you will not speak about things of which you have no knowledge. I recently saw a YouTuber that I've mentioned several times in the video. I'm not going to repeat his name again. But he couldn't remember what compound it was in the toad that he smoked. And then he quoted Hermes, erroneously saying that it was Aleister Crowley that said this Hermes quote like 50 years ago. Crowley died, and then within a minute he said he was going to do a course on psychedelics and spirituality, which just a minute earlier he had established with certainty that he didn't know anything about either thing. And this is really, really common these days. Another guy recently told me he was going to start a mystery school. And I said, oh, that's really cool. So what mystery traditions have you studied? Oh, well, I really need to get around to that. What the fuck? And so what's happening is that people have huge followings, and then they discover that a course will sell, and it doesn't matter if they don't know shit about whatever they're talking about. If they have a huge following, people are going to buy it. And so that sucks. Man, I totally lost my train of thought again. I don't know. It's been an hour. Religion bad. Does anybody remember what I was talking about before I went off on that side tangent about the I couldn't believe that I was seeing that. You know, that this guy saying like, "Oh, I don't know anything about this stuff, basically, but I'm gonna start a course teaching about it soon." You know, that's when I hit the unsubscribe button and was just like, "Oh man, this is really just going to a bad place. This isn't gonna end well." Um, I don't know. Anyways, guys, I think I've ranted enough. I don't remember what the fuck I was talking about, so I'll take that as a cue to just drop it. Thank you so much for supporting us and watching the channel. If you have any questions or anything you want me to talk about, if you ask them or suggest it, yeah, religion bad, knowledge good. It's very, very simple. Very, very simple. You don't need anyone to tell you not to throw rocks at hookers. You know, don't be mean to people whether you like what they're doing or not. You know, I mean, we don't need religion to impart basic morality. It is this world of ours that we live in that is basically a bunch of cynicism wrapped in a veil of politesse that creates these fucked up idiots everywhere that cause all these problems. Religion is not the solution. We have had religion for a long time. And if anything, it's made things worse. And it's interesting to me, too, that a lot of the things that I say will make people angry because they've been taught that it's good to, for example, to defend religious people even if their behavior is toxic and destructive and awful, because that's just what you do. But those same people will admit that our culture has to make changes. But it's kind of like when you go to like a small child and you say, you have to give one of your toys away this Christmas, and then you get 5 new toys. And the little kid says, okay. And then you say, okay, well, how about this one? No! But you understand that we have to give toys away in order to get new toys. So how about this one? No! We have to transcend our conditioning, people, all the way, all of it, all the way. And we have to actually change our beliefs. And that doesn't mean the other guy. That means you and me, too. You know? Even those of us that are pretty advanced with this stuff still have work to do. You know? And what it's going to mean is that you're going to find out some of the things you think and believe are wrong. And the more receptive you are, the more open you are to the possibility that everything you know is wrong, the easier it's going to be for you to actually conform to truth. And to be a beacon of light and revelation for yourself and for everyone around you. But we have to not get triggered so easily, and we have to actually actively look for those places where we are wrong. And we need to start with our pet ideas, the things that you hold the nearest and the dearest. Like in medicine circles, the one thing that I see really consistently is that, you know, when people have bad experiences, when they really start freaking out, it's inevitably because they're clinging to something, some part of their shadow self that they've come to identify with. And so they feel that by releasing this toxic, poisonous, in shamanism, they refer to it as like darts. This dart that has been injected into one of their chakras, you know. They would rather pluck their own eyes out, you know, scratch their faces off, because it's such a powerful energetic charge that has become integrated with their sense of self, you know. And we all have been imbued with those sort of constructs because of our cultural conditioning, what Terence McKenna called provisional programming, right? Our provided surroundings are programming us with these things. And so I think one of the really difficult things for people to address is that oftentimes bad ideas are sold because they can be dressed as if they're coming from the moral high ground. They sound like they're ethical, right? And so and that's really actually very inspiring, that people will do what they think is right, even if it's not really actually right. But at least that's one of the tools of manipulation that is used in cults, it's used by governments, it's used in religion, that people are totally committed in most of them anyways, to acting in accordance with what is right. But it's very, very easy. This is how the road to hell gets paved with good intentions. It's very, very easy for Satan to be disguised as an angel of light, and for us to perceive something as good when it's actually very destructive and negative. Also, I think that as our evolution accelerates, how we relate to different parts of our reality is going to change very, very rapidly. And so if we want to have any chance of survival, we have to enhance our adaptation. This is why psychedelics are becoming so popular during this time period. If nothing else, they give the brain the plasticity that is required for it to adapt and evolve very, very rapidly. And it is that rapid adaptation that gives us the ability to survive. A lot of people misunderstand Darwin. It's not that the strong will survive. It is that the most adaptable will survive. And so as our circumstances change increasingly rapidly, we have to become like water and flow amongst the rocks. So good night, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Hit the like button, share, subscribe. Support us on Patreon or on Zelle, or send us cryptocurrency or something, because we really want to go in the jungle with the Warani. And as of right now, we haven't raised enough money. So please do support us, and thank you so much for watching.